Want to welcome you into the Lootpress Sports Lowdown. As you can see, we are not in the Lootpress studios. We had a bit of a change. We talked about this after our last episode, which aired about a month ago. But with basketball season coming along, we were probably going to have to coordinate things a little bit differently because games are played different days of the week. It's not as set in stone as the football schedule is, but we are back. I'm joined by my co-host Rusty Udy, and this is probably the medium that we're going to be using for the rest of the season, rest of the school year. Works out best for us, and especially with the snowstorm. But Rusty, enough about me. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. My back's not doing the greatest, but it's been a wild ride these last few days with the snow and the cold, and now possibly more snow. And it's kind of weird this time of year. You hate this for the kids, because you get they can't even practice and things like that. And then, before you know it, at the end of the year, you got a bunch of games crammed into one week, and I'm not so sure how good playing 4 and 5 times in a week is really good on a basketball court anyway.
Yeah, no, it's going to be pretty interesting. The first thing I want to start off with is we're recording this on Tuesday, January 7th, and as of right now, I got the email a few minutes ago that the new River CTC Invitational, day three of it has been canceled as well. The first 2 days of it have been canceled, and that's pretty unfortunate because I've always said that this is I'd say over the last 4 years, this has been the best tournament in the state, as far as the teams that's able to get. And, it does a good job of getting a bunch of local teams in there. And it's happened to coincide as well with a lot of our local teams being state championship competitors. I mean, you look at the teams they've had here. They've had Willing Park over the last few years. I don't think they were here last year, but they've been here before and played in this tournament. Wyoming East plays in it every year. They've won the last two girls' state championships. Shady plays in it every year. James and Rose been playing in it. We have a lot of teams that compete for state championships. I think Bluefield played in it last year. I think they played Huntington in it, and they played for a state championship. So they do a really good job of getting a lot of teams in there. So it's just really unfortunate that the first 3 days are canceled. And I'll be honest, looking at the rest of the weather, it might get hit a little bit more because I think we're supposed to get another snowstorm this weekend that might wipe out Saturday as well. And if things don't thaw out and the temperatures don't really seem to be cooperating, the whole tournament might kind of be sunk.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate because we were going to get to see, Martinsburg, Jefferson, South Charleston, teams we don't get to see very often, and you kind of can get a feel for them. When you can better understand when they play games up against themselves up there, how those games play out, and so it's really unfortunate that it looks like it is going to kind of be in flux a little bit. Friday and Saturday looks really bad. Thursday's a little iffy, but that's also I think the coldest day of the week, so you'll have those dangerous wind chills and things like that, and likely won't have will likely have school canceled. So it's the teams that travel on Friday and Saturday. You just don't know if they can make that trip with the impending weather, because right now the only thing you see basically on the weather reports is that we're watching for a potential storm. So it's funny when you have these winters. It seems like they follow like the same track, and with us already being hit once, it's the probability of us getting hit again is probably pretty good.
Yeah, and I'm kind of looking at the schedule. If it does resume on Thursday, and if it stays as is, you have Midland, and these are all boys games with the exception of I'll start with the girls game. Uh, okay, so I'll go in chronological order because I think that's probably the most sensible thing. Boys, you have Midland Trail and Webster County. And again, Webster County is probably going to be one of those higher elevation
The
areas it's going to be
worst,
hit.
yeah.
So we don't even know if we'll get that game. And then Greenbrier West and Pikeview afterwards. That's supposed to be the 2:45 game. And we were talking to Jared Robertson, the head coach over there, and he said Charmco looks worse today than what it did
Right,
yesterday.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
Greater Beckley and Summers County. That's the 4:30 game, and then the only girls' game on Thursday is Princeton and Huntington. And you just mentioned it. Is Huntington going to want to come all the way over here to play that game,
Right.
especially given what the conditions are? And then Cabell Midland and Beckley on the boys' side, another one that is Cabell Midland going to come all the way over here? Our travel conditions going to allow for that. And then Friday we have WVU Tech in there. They play Indiana East, and then University and Beckley girls, which could be actually be a really interesting game. That's
Yep.
Beckley's right outside the AP top 10, and University's in it, and they've beaten GW. So that's that for Beckley. I think that's a really important game. And then the
Yep.
boys' side, Princeton, Lincoln afterwards. Is Lincoln going to want to, again, that all depends. Maybe Friday clears up, but, Lincoln
Right.
coming down. And then Lindsley and Summit. Lindsley, Lindsley's been really good. They're not an SSAC school, but they have, I think
Yeah.
like three of the top five college prospects in the state up there, and they come down for Summit if they do come down. And then Jefferson and Beckley on the boys' side. Again, Jefferson, are they going to come down? Uh,
Yeah.
Saturday's actually really good. On the girls' side, you start off, and that's if we get it. Wyoming East University, and that's actually a game that I'd be really interested in seeing.
Right.
James and Rowe, Greater Beckley, that's another good one, I think, another interesting one, even though those teams aren't in the same class anymore. Lindsley, Princeton on the boys' side, South Charleston and Jefferson. That's going to be another tough one again. If Jefferson, if they're coming down and that storm's supposed to hit, are they going to stick around for
Right.
that? And on the boys' side, Wyoming East and Greenbrier East, which I think could be a really interesting game. And then you close it with Lincoln and Shady. It's really tough. Are you going to get a lot of those out of area teams to come down and for it to be okay? I don't know if Lincoln, that's supposed to be an 8 p.m. tip off. I'm not sure
Right.
if they're going to be allowed to be down here unless they're given
Yeah.
hotels or some sort of accommodations.
Yeah. And right now the timing on it looks like sometime Friday evening into Saturday morning. So that's really kind of the worst, because you can't get a definite read on what Friday's going to be like and what Saturday morning's going to be like. So you're kind of guessing right now. And, with things the way they are in our world right now, everybody's pretty cautious on the things that they do, and rightfully so. And, you just kind of wonder if they're going to be able to kind of make that happen. So, even Thursday, like you said, I mean, with the bitter cold, you don't know how many school systems are going to cancel because of that. And I know it's a place where they're playing off venue, off school, but a lot of times these counties have this no school no play policy, and you just wonder how many of them can actually come play.
Yeah, no, that's kind of the big thing because I think Mercer County and Raleigh County are both that way, and they're pretty strict
Fayette,
once you can name.
Fayette usually is, yeah.
And I think another ramification of this too is, depending on how bad the storm is we get this weekend, and if it carries over, you might have more games canceled next week. But this is over a week now that some of these schools are going to go through and
Right.
they haven't played. So that's
Yep.
another really interesting. It might make for some sloppy basketball whenever they do play because
Right.
I
Exactly.
doubt they've been getting in the gym to practice or anything like that.
Yep.
So it could be interesting.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if you go out to the gym next week and you see some 40 to 43 type game.
Right. A lot of turnovers. Yeah.
Yeah, really
Yeah, and
sloppy.
you got a lot of there's a lot of games being played that are not New River based. I mean, there's still regular season games going on, so that will have some ramifications down the road if they can't get these made up in spots because of when we're starting to vote seeding for regionals, and these teams maybe can't play each other because of that. That could cause some sticky situations and some arguments.
Yeah, and that's definitely gonna be interesting. That's kind of another thing that I thought about with some of these New River cancellations. And teams keep these slots open to play in this. And I'm wondering if some of them are going to be able to make them up. I look at Wyoming East. I know that their schedule. Chances are they're probably not going to play University or Huntington or
Yep.
anything like that. Those are some of that's some of the gamble. And this isn't unique. I think it was 2 years ago where we had a day or two where some schools that had to cancel because and it was for this tournament and because weather had hit. And like I said, it really is a shame because it's a great tournament. It's kind of
Yeah.
one of those ones that we look forward to. It replaced the Big Atlantic, which was usually an end of January tournament, but this is really good. It was always been convenient for us because it gets a lot of these teams in one spot, and we can get an
Yeah.
opportunity to cover them and see where they are at, a couple weeks, about a month into the season, and it usually gives us some pretty high quality matchups.
Yeah, and some interesting matchups. Teams you don't see play each other sometimes.
hmm Like I kind of go back to I think it was the year when the Chapmans and Eli Allen were seniors,
Right.
and James Rowe and Shady got to play in that game. I think it was like 55-52.
Yeah, it was a
Really,
classic.
yeah, exactly. And those
Yeah.
are the kind of games that we think about
I
when.
think they played Woodrow that year too and lost in the final seconds on foul shots, so that was interesting.
Yeah, and I think that they're yeah, that was right because it was beforehand. Because I do remember I think I remember seeing some of the James Monroe fans on Facebook. They weren't very happy about it. And
Yeah,
yeah, and I think that Wyoming East may have played and beat Beckley the next night or so, or
yeah.
something.
It's a crazy time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. But speaking of Wyoming County, let's go ahead and kind of transition into get caught up on everything that's going down there. So, if you're new to things, the Wyoming East and Westside boys basketball head coaches, Thomas Evans from Westside and Derek Brooks from Wyoming East, are both gone at this point. Derek Brooks had his contract terminated, I think right before Christmas at a board meeting, and Thomas Evans had his contract terminated. I think it was Friday at a
yeah,
board meeting, and we didn't get the, there was no reason given for Derek's termination. And I've heard through the grapevine some different things. Allegedly, he had made one of the allegations, or mostly the allegation against him, was that he had made an inappropriate comment. And he had fought that. He had his hearing. His hearing was closed. Now, Tom, when he did his, and I'm very grateful for this as a journalist, that he opened his up, and the entire thing's on YouTube, so you can go there and watch it. He had some allegations of just inappropriate comments to players and discouraging them from attending a cheer competition. And the one thing that the Wyoming County Board of Education Council had said is, they basically made the case on he's a chronic rule breaker. And they had listed out different things. They kind of started chronologically. The day of the cheer state competition, the day before, so it was on a Saturday. It was a Saturday of the AAA and Quad A football state championship games. But the Friday, the day before that on Friday, he had told them that he didn't want them going up there to watch it, and he had kind of gave his reasons. But if you wanted to, just come and talk to him. He didn't want his players walking around on their feet all day and then going into Chapmanville, which was a big game. Chapmanville, I think, is number 5 in AAA right now. They only have one loss, and Westside ended up losing that game. And I think he said 2 of his better players were up there, and he didn't really have much of an issue with that. But apparently, the allegation was that some of the players had went to the principal, Miss Katie Endicott, and told her that he had threatened them with playing time, that he would bench them if they went up there. And he had said that was not true. So whenever they met next time, he was kind of joking with them. He was like, you guys aren't gonna, you're not gonna go and tell the principal on me. And kind of joking. He's like, well, I'm 50 years old and I've been to the principal's office, more now than when I was in high school. And he had made a comment, and this was a comment that they said, and he didn't deny it. He said it, but he said, you can kiss my white ass. But he kind of laid context to it as to where it came from. It was basically like the players were ripping him for, his short. He had worn shorts earlier in the day and he had really pale legs, and they were ripping him. And then whenever they finished their discussion, they wanted to run a certain drill, like a shooting drill, and he told them, no, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, a different drill, and they just kind of kept going back and forth, like, nah, let's do that. And that's where he had said the comment. And some of the allegations laid against him that were laid in that board case were that he pointed at players and said it. So who knows exactly what happened. So he was suspended indefinitely after that. Now, on top of that, at the Chapmanville game, he had received 2 technical fouls, so he was ejected. Uh, so there was that on top of that, and with the ejection comes a 2-game suspension anyway. So he was placed on indefinite leave. I think it more so stemmed from the comment and all that. And then while he was gone, he came by to drop some keys off and to drop off the donor check, and he had addressed the team because he said that Nick Cook, the interim head coach, had asked him to do that, or asked him if he wanted to do that. I think that his wording was, they need to hear from you, Thomas. They need to hear from you. So he went ahead and he addressed it, and that ended up coming back to bite him because he wasn't supposed to do that. So I think all of that kind of added up, and that's where they went for the termination. And he went through, it was about a 4.5, 5 hour meeting. We
yeah,
we both kind of tuned into it to watch it. I had tuned in because of the Wyoming East news. I was told that to expect that there should be the new head coach announcement there. So I had tuned in for that, and I didn't realize that they were going to do Thomas's hearing there. And he chose to have an open hearing, so everything's out there. And again, like I'm incredibly grateful for that, because that allows us to kind of get the facts and have everything out there. What he said, they said, it's all kind of taken care of there. But for the time being, Nick Cook is still the interim head coach, and Tom Evans is out. So that's the current state of affairs in Wyoming County. And for Wyoming East, they've moved on to where they have approved their new head coach, and it's Kent McBride, former Concord head coach. Derek's out, and Herbie Brooks, who was the assistant coach under Derek, and also Derek's dad, Mullins legend, he was going to stay on and help Kent, and he did so for a couple hours. So Kent was approved on Friday, late Friday, after Thomas's hearing. They had a practice, and the next day Herbie had resigned after he said that he was going to stay on. I assumed that he probably just kind of had a little more time to think about it and kind of went through things and just decided to resign because Herbie actually threw his hat in the ringer and applied for the job when it came open, and he didn't get it. So that's where we are right now. Kent McBride coaches his first game on Saturday. It's against Westside. So you have a brand new head coach against an interim head coach, and Nick Cook's not new. He had coached West Side, I think, back up until 2015 or 2016 or so.
I think he said it's been 10 years. It's been 10 years he's out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's where we are. And now, the two teams that were in all this turmoil, they played on Saturday. But we'll get to that game in a second. But you've been around, you've seen a lot of it, and you were even down there on Saturday for the game. So, what's kind of your takeaway from all this?
Well, it's just really unfortunate, I mean, because it's both teams are really in a situation where they could um, make the state tournament and make some noise at the state tournament. They're both very good, and you just don't want this kind of disruption right at the beginning of things. And I mean, the bad part is that it affects you just wonder how it affects the kids. I mean, typically, like when Wyoming East played Saturday, Ken even said, a lot of what they were running out there, he didn't even know what they were running. They were just kind of playing basketball and doing what they've been taught over the years with Derek there. So, it's just a transition, and in the situation they're going into, you just don't want to have that kind of a transition going on. But yeah, there's always been some crazy stuff happen down in Wyoming County, with the basketball coach and people wanting people out and other people wanting in and different things like that. So not a real big surprise if you've watched basketball in Wyoming County for a long time, but it's really unfortunate because it just I don't know. It's hard to make a definitive comment on yay or nay because you really feel like you don't know all of the full circumstances is what's going on. But just what's kind of been on the surface. I'm 61 years old. I've been around for a long time, and you know, coaches cursing were well, okay. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just, I mean, I've been called things and, said things. Heck, I've had people in the stands call me things that, nowadays would probably get them thrown out. I mean, it was just different. So, yeah, our world's just different now. And you've got to be cautious about what you say and the things you do. And, the thing it's sad is like when that, you just have to be careful with how your actions are and what your words are. And, it's just it's kind of a sad situation all around. You just hope the kids can bounce back and be the teams that they look like they were going to be, by the time postseason rolls around.
Yeah, absolutely. And from the Wyoming East end, I can't say one way or the other, whether they made the right decision with what they did with Derek or what happened or anything like that. And I know that there are a lot of people upset that Herbie didn't get the job, and I understand that too. That's a guy that 40 years ago was even 40 years later, he's still, what he did at Mullins is
Yeah.
pretty well known. I think I actually, yeah, right, right here. I have kind of one of the old articles from the story that I did where he scored 50 points in that state tournament game. But yeah, that's kind of where things are now with thing. Yeah, here it is right here. Brooks scores
Yep.
50 a record. But yeah, I don't think that they made a bad decision with the hiring of Kent. I understand, and you can read the comments on Facebook about it. There are a lot of people pretty perturbed about the process, and if it was pretty illegitimate, I definitely understand where those concerns come from and why they feel that way. But I
Right.
think if you look at it strictly from a basketball standpoint, I think that they nailed the hire. Kent, I was at Concord whenever he was there, I was there for pretty much his entire tenure, actually. His first year was when I was a senior in high school, and then, my next four years there were when he was there as well. And he led the program to an MEC championship, and they beat West Liberty that year twice. And West Liberty was, I think, the top team in the nation still at that point. They've been really good for the last 10 years.
Right, right.
He beat them twice. They won an MEC title. They went to the NCAA D2 tournament. He's done it. He's won titles. It's in his blood. And he wasn't taking much credit for that win or anything like that, and I could understand that. But you know my takeaway from that game was I came away from the West Side then, and I was a little bit shocked because I thought they had almost, and we'll talk about this in a second, but I thought they had every upper hand. But just kind of going back to Ken, I think that whenever all this is put behind, and I don't know if it will be, because I'd imagine that Derek and Herbie and to some extent are probably going to lawyer up, because the trend has always been in the program that you hire from within. I don't think that they've ever gone out of the program to hire a head coach, and I think that's on the girls' side as well. So it did break precedent a little bit, but I don't really necessarily believe in the precedent of hiring from within. That doesn't mean that Herbie would have been a bad choice. He probably would have been an excellent choice. They were 2-1 with him at the helm. Their loss was to a Beckley team that I've bought high on, and they beat Charleston Catholic. And Charleston Catholic's down. They're battered, but they're still Charleston Catholic. They're still well coached. They still have that DNA in them where they play tough, and they beat them in the Armory. And like Kent said, a lot of what they were running on Saturday to beat Westside was a lot of stuff that Herbie and Derek had put in. So I think, just speaking from a basketball standpoint, I do like the Kent hire, and I'm kind of curious to see what Westside does on their end.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be. I don't know if they'll stick with Nick the rest of the year. I mean, I don't think that would be a bad choice either. I mean, from their perspective, it's kind of. I think it's just still a transition period with Westside, because clearly under when they played it under Thomas, they were just running up the floor and shoot it as much as they could. And not that Nick wants to stop that, but whenever they do have to set up, go into a set, he's got some sets that he wants them to run and work on. And I think they had just a little bit of a confusion there, and it maybe is the worst time to play, a Wyoming East or somebody like that. Even though Wyoming East was in a little bit of transition too, they were it was just kind of last minute, and they just kind of played. They just kind of did what they knew best and played. And I mean, talking to Zach Hunt after the game, I mean, you can definitely tell that it bothers the kids, because I mean, it wasn't like they didn't like Derek; they liked Derek a lot. And Herbie, they loved her because Herbie, like you said, is a legend down there. When you have a legend like that and has been to won state championships and been in the college game and played well in the college game, you respect that, as an athlete. And, they really like that. And, I think that will transition over with Ken as well. But, there is a period there, you're kind of, you got to remember these are 17, 18-year-old kids. And, a lot of times you don't understand the process. It's almost like, why is this happening? I don't get this. So they're just kind of doing their thing right now. But to their credit, I mean, they really, really played incredibly well that night. I mean, I really thought Westside looked a little out of sync, and I think they'll be fine, as it goes along the way. But this is all a traumatic situation. I mean, if it was a coach that you hated or something like that, and that might be a different situation, and it might be more of a relief, and you might play more free. But when you actually have a coach that and I legitimately seem like the kids like Thomas as well. So I mean, I just think it's a transition period. I'm really interested to see what it looks like in a month from now when they play at Westside, when they play each other. But I really think that both of these teams are going to be really good. There's a lot when you watch them on the floor. There's a lot to be excited about on both ends. They both have really good players, and once they kind of get to where they're ready and gel, I think they're going to be tough to handle.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway is I really trust Wyoming East a lot, and those kids. And I really thought going in that Westside had the advantage. Nick had been around; they had already coached a game under Nick, and I know West Logan Christian is bad. Pretty bluntly, they're bad and the starters only played a quarter, but they have been able to practice. And I was extremely high going into the season on this West Side team. I told anybody that would
Yeah,
listen that I thought that they were a top four team in Double A, possibly top three. And right now, they're barely hanging on in the top 10. And I think part of that is also when I was casting my AP poll vote, I was just kind of looking and I was like, I don't really love a lot of the bottom of top 10. Uh,
right.
in all fairness too, to West Side, you look at who they've played. Logan, who seems to be a buzzsaw right now. Like that seems to be a
Yeah.
legit double A team
Yeah,
right
I
now.
watched them against Scott the other night when we were stuck here at the house, and they're pretty solid. They're pretty good.
Yeah, so they're good, and you're talking about them being, possibly a semifinalist or state championship caliber team,
Yep.
and then you look at Chapmanville, obviously very good. A lot of people, they're top five in AAA, and AAA is really good in that top five. So I think that also factors in. And then I know the rivalry game, anything could kind of happen. But the thing is, for me, West Side, like those kids are veterans. A lot of those kids they played a lot, and that's why I was so high on them coming in. Wyoming East, you look at it, none of those guys were the guy last year. Braxton Morgan played well, and he'd probably be a good secondary player at times to Cole Lambert. But none of those guys were the guy last year. And now they're starting two freshmen, a sophomore and Connor Fox, who started last year, Braxton Morgan, and then Zach Hunt as well. But those guys, I think Zach might be the only senior because I think Braxton's still a junior.
Right. Braxton's still
So,
junior.
exactly. So, I kind of look at it and I expect they're all right. They're younger, they're a little less experienced, so this probably favors West Side. So if you're
Yeah.
Wyoming East, this is a really nice trend for you. And I think they came in, they're number four, I think, in the AP poll, and that's deserved. That's where I had them. I think the way I voted, I had Wheeling Central, Williamstown, and Logan in my top three, and I had Wyoming East at four. So if you're Wyoming East, I think there's a lot to build off of. This snowstorm probably throws some wrenches in things for them a little bit. But yeah, I would buy pretty high on this Wyoming East team. Just to be able to handle all that environment for being as young as what they are, it was really impressive.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point too when we talked the other night. I mean, Westside's got to get it together because not only to get to Charleston, but just within the region. I mean, the region's tough. I mean, Wyoming East is there, and I think we're both pretty much in agreement that Bluefield, by the time that another 3 or 4 weeks rolls around, they're going to be pretty hard to handle. They might not be a typical Bluefield team, but they're going to be really good, and could be one of those teams that come out of that region. You got Midland Trail that looks good. I mean, Liberty looks good right now. I mean, you get kind of an off night and a night you don't play really well, you will get knocked off.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I 100% agree with that. I think that probably wraps up all the Wyoming County stuff for me right now. The way I would probably rank the region, and I know I got a chance to see Bluefield the other night against Shady Spring, but I might give them a little bit of an edge over Westside depending on what the night is. And that's one thing I think that if you're Westside, you kind of got to get the ship righted pretty quickly.
Right.
You don't get much of a chance to get a mulligan here, especially with the way the regional seating goes.
Exactly.
And you don't want to be going to Bluefield in a regional. You don't want to be going to Rushford
No,
Aubrey.
that's
Yeah.
never worked out well.
Absolutely. And I think that, it's the top four of that region, in my opinion, in any order is Wyoming East, Bluefield, West Side, and James Monroe.
Right.
That's tough. I think getting the number one seed is so crucial.
Yep.
You want to, and I think once you get to basically that the semifinal of those regional, or I guess it'd be the co-regional championships of those games. Like they're going to be tough no matter who you're playing. So I think it's incredibly important to kind of go ahead and try to get these wins. So and if you're Wyoming East, you got two really big double A wins under your belt right now in Charleston Catholic, which doesn't go within region, but that a lot of people are still going to hold that. That's going to hold some weight in their voting process, and then obviously beating West Side given the circumstances. So yeah,
Right.
I want to move on to some of the other boys teams. I kind of want to hit on Shady before we move over entirely to the girls side. But man, what a start for them. They they looked really good. Kind of what we've expected so far. And they've been dealing with a lot of injuries. They've started two freshmen in almost every game outside of one, the one against Beckley, because Kai Olson has some leg issues that they're trying to deal with. And kind of manage him throughout the rest of the season. But they've had to start two freshmen alongside Jack Williams and Jalen Bailey and Brady Johnston. And right now, Brody Radford has been out. He hasn't played yet. He's had an ankle injury. So we've got a lot going on here with Shady, but they still keep winning. They pulled out another win. I think it was their seventh consecutive win against Beckley, and they beat them to win the little general battle for the Armory tournament. Then they went into Bluefield, and Jack Williams had another big showing. He had 34 points, and I don't like to get into the player of the year stuff too early. We've talked about this with Kenny, but I legitimately I think Jack's in that conversation. I think he's one of the top three players in the state of West Virginia. Now, I do also say this. I acknowledge that Caleb Thomas from Spring Mills is a very bad man, so he's in that top
Right,
three too.
right,
But
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think Jack, everything that he's shown, just how he's guided the ship for them and kept them afloat, and it's just everything that he's done for them. I think that he's a legitimate player of the year, and it's kind of showing for the Shady Spring team, which is now number one in the AP poll, which it kind of shocked me. I thought that they'd gotten a little bit of disrespect in these polls. I do respect a lot of Fairmont Senior. I can't argue and gripe with that too much because I think they're the years that Fairmont did win it. Shady was number one in the AP poll coming in both years. So, that I would, I think that's fair. But I do the Nitro in Bridgeport one surprised me a little bit just because I think if you want to be in that mix, you got to win it first. I wouldn't be keen to hand that to them yet.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they're not better than Shady, but that's just kind of my philosophy and the kind of the way that I would vote with those. So I wouldn't have had Nitro or Bridgeport ahead of them, but right now Shady is on top. They're undefeated. So yeah, I think it's a solid start for the Tigers again.
They just kind of have the Jack just kind of has the it factor, I mean, and really, when you look over his career, this is basically the first year that he's been healthy. He's had the injuries he's dealt with from knee injuries to eye injuries to all kinds of crazy stuff, and this year's kind of the first year he's fully healthy. But it just kind of shows you how good a player he is that when he had those other players around him, he just blended in and did what was necessary to run the ship then. And now the fact that they do have some younger kids playing and he's got to step up more. I mean, he hit 34 against Bluefield. I mean, that's just incredible. I mean, that's we like to joke around and compare him to his brother, who's incredible. But that was a performance like his brother came up with at times. Whenever they needed somebody to just start pouring in buckets right and left, that's what Tommy did. So, I mean, I think him and especially in the Woodrow game, you could kind of see him take control of things. You could see Jalen Bailey kind of take control of things. And, when you have two kids like that have been through the battles, been through the wars, you can't shake them. They don't get shook. And I think that's the biggest thing because even against Woodrow, they were down. And it's, I mean, that, I even, when he was at the state tournament, I know a lot of people don't know Jack's a really good golfer too. And Shady won the state golf tournament this year. You could never see any panic in them. Whenever things would start to go sour, they don't panic. They just know they're going to come out of it. And, it's pretty amazing the way he's played so far this year. Now, I don't know if he's going to need to play at that level the rest of the year, but it's definitely there. I mean, I think right now, if Shady gets back to the as healthy as we think they're going to be, this might be the best chance for people to get them because it's kind of time to. I guess if you're going to get them now, because they're with the injuries and stuff. But I think they're the best team in AAA right now without any question. I mean, I I was a little surprised Bridgeport kind of rattled Fairmont Senior a little bit, but Bridgeport comes up with teams like that every once in a while. They're usually pretty well coached, and they'll be solid. But I still think until you to be the man, you got to beat the man. And right now, Shady's kind of been the man. And I mean, I know they lost a couple times to Fairmont, but that was last second games. You're looking at a team that could arguably say we could be 4-time state champion, 4 in a row. So that's how good this program is right now.
Yeah, so just a couple of the games that they have left on the schedule right now. I just kind of want to highlight. They get Beckley again on the 16th. That's at Shady, and then they go to Spring Mills on the 20th. That's pretty typical for Shady. They've opened with Morgantown the last couple years. That's not anything new for them. They have Musselman the next day, so I'm assuming they're probably staying and playing that game. And they play at the Armory again. They play Beckley, Greenbrier East twice, and they host Fairmont Senior. So yeah, that's a tough 4 game stretch there, back to back against Greenbrier East, Beckley, and Fairmont.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm interested to see how those Greenbrier East games go because Greenbrier East pretty solid this year.
and another interesting one to close the regular season is they host Logan,
Yeah,
and yeah, yeah, that's another good one to kind
yeah,
of keep an eye on.
yep,
But yeah, I'm pretty high on this team. Once they get everyone back and they get healthy, it'll be interesting. The one concern I do have for them is kind of the same one I had whenever Jack's brother Tommy was a senior, height. When they
right,
have to match up with somebody big, they have to send Jack into the post to guard him. So I'm
yeah,
wondering if they run into a bigger team, you do that, can you get Jack in foul trouble? And
right.
it's tougher. I do trust a kid like Jalen Bailey to be able to do his thing without Jack on the floor, but everyone else is you know, Jack's a special player, and I think he's a player of the year type candidate for a reason. And it's hard. A lot of the other kids kind of play off of Jack and Jalen and what they're able to do, and there's nothing wrong with that. You need teams to be able to do that in order to win efficiently. But yeah, I agree with you. If you're going to get them, now's the time to do it because those freshmen that are starting are getting their feet wet, and they're playing pretty well. They're not really making mistakes. They're doing, like, I don't really look at things like, I've not watched them. I've seen them. I've seen every one of their games so far. Yeah, we've staffed every one of their games except for that first one against West Logan. So we've seen them 4 times, and I've never really looked at them and been like, oh wow, they're suffering because Gabe or Eli are out here doing something wrong. So I think that's a really good spot for him to be in right now.
But and it's not going to hurt for them to get, Gabe and Eli to get game experience at this time of year against a Beckley or somebody like that, because that's the thing you got to remember. I mean that Brody's not playing, who's one of their best guards and is an incredible defensive player, and he doesn't play against Beckley. You got the 2 freshmen in there, and they are in that environment, and they still play well. And I mean, I was really impressed with Brady Johnston. Brody and Brady, well, they're going to get me before the year's out. But I thought he really stepped his game up this year, and they've always been pretty high on this kid, and I could see why in that game in particular because there was a couple times he took some shots, and you're kind of like, maybe that wasn't what you wanted to see, but he just stepped in there confidently, knocked him down, and if he can hit shots like that for him, Shady's going to be tough.
Yeah, he's a good compliment and again, like, I don't say that in a bad way. Like, you have to be a complimentary player
Right, right,
sometimes. Like, you have to be, and that's what matters more than anything is having complimentary players to win. But they do a good job when they're in transition. They can dump off to him. I think in the Beckley game, he had like 7 straight points in that, or
yeah,
7 points in that third quarter because
very
they
crucial
were able to
for
get
third
him.
quarter.
They were
Yeah,
able to push it. They got him an open three or so.
yeah,
So I think that the way they're able to execute that it is good, and you can't. They're a team right now that you don't have to worry about them, having too many basketballs. You
right.
just when you did one of the tab previews that was done, a coach said, obviously, my only concern is, I got 5 players and only one basketball.
Right.
I don't have to as much worry
Yeah.
about that, with them.
I'm really interested to see them to play next time they play Beckley because every time I've watched Beckley struggle, my feeling after the game is you didn't throw it to Jalen Walton enough. You didn't throw it to Jalen Walton enough. And when they do that, Beckley's pretty strong. And since that game, it kind of appears by the stats that we're seeing that they are pitching it into Jalen a lot more. And I mean, it's anybody knows the best way to knock down threes is to go inside out. And Beckley has 3-point shooters, but that can't be your dominant play. You got to go inside first. And, Jalen's got some really incredible post moves. He's fast. He doesn't really look that tall when you consider him a post player, but man, he's got like springs that can really, he can really jump. And,
Aggressive,
I
high
thought
effort dude.
when they were successful against Shady in that game, I thought he had the ball in his hands and they were doing fine. And then once they don't throw it into him, that's when they start to struggle. And so I'm interested to see how they approach that next time.
Yeah, so I think first half of that game he had 12 points, and in the
Right.
second half it was 14, or it was 12 or 13. Either way, it was like 3 or 4 points he scored in the second half, and they just kind of went
Yeah.
away from him. And one thing that stood out to me for Beckley in the early part of the season is that Kobe Dillon struggled a little bit to kind of get going, and he's a key piece for them. For them to really be able to contend, I think they're going to need him. 13 to 15 points a game. And when you establish Jalen, I think that's one thing that collapses defenses, and it makes Kobe just that much more of an efficient player. And that's really what they're going to need, because they're going to need everyone firing on all cylinders. And I told you this is the highest I've ever bought in on a Beckley basketball team since I've been
Yeah.
doing this.
Yeah.
And I genuinely do think that they're capable of being a semifinalist team. I don't
Yep.
want to push it too much to a state championship, but I think it's reasonable expectations for them to be playing on. I think Quad A gets Friday this year, so yeah, I think it's they could be playing in the semifinals, and depending on how seeding gets, you got an opportunity to play in the state championship, and I think that they live up to it, because you look around at some of the other teams in Quad A, Morgantown and Spring Mill is really good. You know, but behind that, I think that you have a lot. You could really wonder. GW, I know they're 5-0 right now. South Charleston's pretty good. They bring back a lot of length and size. But Beckley's always played those teams tough.
Right.
So
Yeah. And my understanding is they've actually moved. That's why I'm interested to see them again, because my understanding is they moved Kobe to the point and moved Zion to the two, and that's this thing has really started to flow off of that too. And so sometimes it's just a matter of getting the pieces on the chessboard in the right spots, and so we'll. I'm not sure if Cabell Midland's going to be a good test for them. I'm not being mean or anything, but I think that's a game that Beckley should handle. I was really interested to see them play Jefferson. I really hope that game happens, because Jefferson is a consistent state tournament type team. They have a good program. They're a lot of speed, and definitely can jump out of the building. So I was kind of looking forward to that game. So hopefully that happens.
yeah, so I just kind of looking at it. If they don't play the Jefferson game, after that it's at Bluefield, at Shady, Greenbrier East at home, at Oak Hill, home against Princeton. I don't see like a game that really intrigues me on their schedule as a litmus
Right.
test for them until they host South Charleston on January 30th.
Exactly.
And then yeah, their schedule's kind of tailed back a little bit this year as opposed to what it's been. And I know some of that is GW dropped them. They they're supposedly the tale that I had heard from somebody was that there were supposed to be some officials. The SSAC had messed up the officiating assignment, so they had to assign Charleston area officials to the regional game last year. Uh, and what ended up happening was, yeah, it would be regional game, I think. Yeah,
Yeah,
regional
it
game.
was a regional contest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
against
The
GW.
co-final. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, they Beckley had figured that out. They're like, hey, so then the SSAC was like, oh, we messed that up. And GW didn't like the late change because they were Charleston area official. Now, again, this is just what I've heard. This is allegedly. So
Right.
it's left some sore feelings for GW, and that's kind of why that they're not on the schedule this year. And it's tough. That game is always entertaining. It's always close.
Always.
No
Yeah.
matter if one of
Exactly.
those teams comes in 20-0 or 0-20, it's always somehow a weird 3-point game. So it really is tough, especially with the way this regional seating thing goes. So yeah, that's kind of the skinny there.
Very interesting, because that was always one. It's almost like a rivalry game, between the two. It used to be, kind of Beckley and Capital for a long time, Beckley and Charleston, and GW had kind of slipped into that position, with kind of owning Beckley a little bit in the Army there for a little while, and so it's I thought it was real unfortunate. And again, I'm not throwing blame at anybody. I don't know who's to blame is, but it's the kids that suffer, because I'm sure the kids want to play each other.
Yeah, no, it'd be a lot of fun. I want to move on to the girls' side of things, and I do want to start off with Greenbrier East, because they're the highest ranked team in the area right now. They're number 2 in the AP poll. I think they're tied for number 1 in the coaches poll. I can't remember off the top of my head, but
Right.
this is what I expected from Greenbrier East coming in. I told people, as soon as those classifications came out last year, or as soon as the state tournament ended, I expected Greenbrier East to be one of the top 2 or 3 teams coming in at the AAA.
Absolutely.
It'd be right there with Wayne and Nitro came in as number 1, in the preseason, and they should, defending state champions. They only lost one kid, didn't play a ton. But Greenbrier East beat them at home. Wayne's a problem. My issue with Wayne is obviously they've come into the state tournament the last couple of years, and I would say it's not a stretch to say that they've underperformed. They lost
Right.
teams that they beat by 30 points in the regular season in the state tournament. Uh,
Yep.
so that's kind of the one thing hanging over Wayne. Otherwise, right now, I'd probably say from top to bottom, like they're hard to match up with. They have a lot of length. They have those two twins. They're just really good all around. But that top three, and obviously, but Greenbrier East is kind of the start off of the season. They have really impressive. It'll be interesting to see because I think with Coach Justice kind of taking that senator position, they now have to play on Fridays and Saturdays to help accommodate with his schedule with everything that he's got going on, and the schedule kind of reflects that too. So I'm kind of curious if they're able to keep that momentum because this, special team, a lot of those kids are still young and they'll be back next year too. But obviously, like right now, the goal is to try and win a state championship this year. And I think they've already proven that they've got the kids that they're capable of doing that, beating Nitro in a 16-point game, I think it was to open the season. So and that's kind of the one thing I'm watching is can they keep this momentum going on the back end?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure all their games have been double digit wins. I mean, they've really pretty kind of put a hammer on everybody, and they really are good. I mean, they got guards that can move it up and down the floor, and Kennedy Stewart. We always the joke is, she can knock it down from one step over half court, and that's about the truth of that girl. I mean, she has got a quick trigger, and when you think she's going to, you got a step to defend her. I mean, she's already fired it up and knocked it down, and you got Ava Workman and Jada Waller, and I mean, a lot of people don't know just how good McKenna McClure is. I mean, she's one of those players that's a stat sheet filler. I mean, she rebounds, she assists, she scores. She's kind of like that 10-10-10 player. And, those are really key people to have on successful teams. And, then they have the Hannah Fuller inside who's, she's a force and, she's a rim protector. She passes the ball really well. And when you can throw it into a big, and they've got enough basketball IQ to toss it back out to an open 3-point shooter, and you have the deadly 3-point shooters like they have, they can run up points on you really quick. So, and they've got some solid girls coming off the bench. So I'm like you. I was really felt like they would make a deep run in AAA, and it's not far fetched to say they could win this thing.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate they had the game against George Washington canceled because that would have been a good little litmus test.
Yeah.
The rest of the schedule isn't really overly difficult. The kind of games that stand out to me are they have Charleston Catholic, and I believe that's at home, and then they'll have the I can't tell if that's at home or if that's part of the Springhouse tournament. Might be part of the Springhouse, but that Charleston Catholic's a good double
That
A
is,
team too.
yeah,
They're
that
kind of
is
one of those
Springhouse.
dark horses. They play a style that really challenges you, and I think that'll be a good test for Greenbrier East. And they play at Nitro on February 7th, so basically about a week before regional play begins. And so that's another good to me, another good challenge. Yeah, I just like the way they're built. Hannah Fuller, a really big 6'2", 6'3" center in the middle, and you have Ava Workman, Kennedy Stewart, and Jada Fuller, all these kids that can handle the ball. And you mentioned it, McClure. They're built really well. They're very well rounded. Not really a team that has a ton of weaknesses right now. If you did, maybe you think the size a little bit, but I don't really look at them and worry too much. I think that they have a chance to really be playing there on the last Saturday of the season.
Yep, I do too. I mean, they're really impressive to watch. I got to see him play against Beckley that night, and granted, Beckley's still kind of finding themselves, with the new pieces they have, but they were really impressive that night. And I think Greenbrier East is going to be hard to handle. A team that is going to be interesting in that region is Sissonville. Sissonville kind of gave Greenbrier East a lot of trouble in a scrimmage game, so that's going to be a team to watch in that section too. I mean, that region too, but. If they both finish 1-2, they won't play each other.
Yeah, surprisingly, they're not in the schedule, but I could also imagine has something to do with everything kind of changing late a little bit. I want to move on to Wyoming East. Since the season started, they have lost to the number one and number two teams. They were number one coming in, deserved it. And these other teams, they now both of them were on neutral courts. Wheeling Central came in as top three team. They lost to Wheeling Central, I think it was by two or 3 points up there. They had played Kaiser and went into overtime the night before. I think they finished that game up around 9:30 or so. And then you turn back around and you play Wheeling Central. You lose basically at the buzzer. You have a good look at a three. It just doesn't fall. And then this past weekend, they played Williamstown, a rematch of the state championship game at Logan. And that came down to basically the buzzer to Wyoming East had a probably about a I'd say 26-foot open 3-point shot. Weren't able to really get set. The shot didn't fall. They lose, I think, 44-41. I wouldn't hit the panic button or anything on either of those wins. To me, those are coin flip games. Uh,
Right.
if you hit a couple more free throws, one more shot falls, both of those outcomes are different. Uh, what I do think is concerning for Wyoming East now is I think you're kind of locked into at best a 2 seed in the state tournament. I know it's kind of early to be looking ahead at seeding, but you're basically in that situation where you've lost to number one and number two. So unless
Right.
those teams hit massive skids, you're
You
kind of
got both
stuck
of them.
in,
Got to beat
at
both of them.
three. Yeah, exactly. So and they've done it both ways before. They've been two and they've had to beat three, and then go on and beat one. I think they've only ever been the 1 seed uh, and won it twice, maybe. So, I think last year they were the 1 seed was the first time that they had won it as a 1 seed. So, they've done that before. But it is a little bit tougher this year because I think that this top three seeds are a little bit more compact than what they've been in years past.
Right.
So I think that's sort of the issue there. But if Wyoming East, I do think one thing they really need to clean up is find a way to address the free throw situation because they
Yeah.
missed some late. They had an opportunity, I think, with 10 seconds left in that Williamstown game to tie it, and they missed both free throws. And that was an issue going back to last year's state championship game. They were 5 of 16 from the free throw line. It's kind of one of those things that's hanging over their head. They were able to overcome it last year, but that's not really the fire that I want to keep playing with if I'm them.
Right. Yeah, that's very dangerous, and especially in tournament situations. But the thing about Wyoming East to me is I feel like they're going to get a lot better. I
Hmm.
mean, I think their foul shooting, that's an issue that's got to be cleaned up and hopefully gets fixed. But they're kind of still in the post Matty Clark, get kind of some chemistry and some flow from that. There's been some really bright spots at times. I mean, Abby Baker to me has been a huge bright spot. Early in the season, I think she's going to be a dominant player, especially with her speed and everything. They just need to get a little more settled and kind of working off of each other just a little bit. And if they can do that, which I feel like they will, I think that's the upside to Wyoming East is they're going to get better. How much better can Williamstown and Wheeling Central get over that same period? And I kind of feel like the window is bigger for Wyoming East to get better, by tournament time, provided they do get the foul shooting situation under control. Because when you're talking about two teams that are 2 or 3 point type games, you're not going to just run out and run away from. If it's going to be a tight game, every foul shot matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Wheeling Central game, I got a chance to kind of watch that in between the state championship games in football. And I came away from that one really thinking that Wyoming East kind of snatched the defeat from the jaws of victory. They led by 8 going into the final quarter.
Right.
And then just kind of free throws. They weren't able to hit free throws, and they had some bad turnovers that they didn't make last year with Maddie Clark in transition. You're getting a little bit pushing a little bit too far ahead. Throwing across court and kind of letting Wheeling Central get into your passing lanes. But I agree with you too, and we saw the same thing last year where Wyoming East kind of held out, what they wanted to do defensively up until the
Right.
postseason started. We saw them doing a lot more trapping and things like that, different pressure looks that they brought, and that's basically what won them the state championship game in the final 4 minutes, and the Charleston Catholic game in the quarterfinals. They busted out the break in case of emergency defense and
Right.
ended up producing the points that they needed to escape those games with victories. And I think that, they probably have that in their back pocket again. But I also got to give kudos to Williamstown and Wheeling Central. These are games that, from what I've been told, those two schools have been trying to get Wyoming East on the schedule, after what happened last year. They wanted to get a look at those pressure looks and
Right.
see what they could do. did they have a chance to possibly to beat them? Because we hear coaches talk about it all the time. When it's talking about Shady or Wyoming East, it's one thing, or Bluefield. It's one thing to say they pressure you. It's another thing to actually see it. You can't simulate it. So,
Right.
kudos to them. We talked about it with these other teams with Shady on the boys' side to be the man, you got to beat the man. And early on, those two teams got to feel pretty good about where they are. And both of those teams, I think, control their fate for the one seed because I think they play each other. They're in that same region, and it's really tough. I think that that to me that's the best region in the state. I can't remember if it's Region 2 or not, but if you're Williamstown, you look at their schedule. They beat Wyoming East, and they have Wheeling Central on there. They have Summers County on there, and they have St. Mary's on there twice. You're talking. I think St. Mary's right now is number 4. They only have one loss. So yeah, if you're Wyoming East, you really need a lot of help, and it's really going to be hard for them to see them getting the one seed. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're out of luck. Like I said, coin flip games essentially. Both of those games were one shot bounces this way or that way, and you come out with the win. And Williamstown, Wheeling Central will probably feel the same way too. They're like, hey, like we came back to win this, but a lot of fun to go. But to me, it just kind of tells me that I think Double A when we get to that point, if everyone stays healthy, I think that it'll be, the jewel of the state tournament again
Semifinals is
this year.
crazy.
Yeah,
And then one thing about Wyoming East too is they've scheduled tough this year, and that sometimes don't want to schedule too tough, but that may be a big factor for them. Because just some of the points you're making, they got to learn to close out games. They got to learn to play in those tight games down the stretch. When you don't have a Matty Clark that can kind of take over the game a little bit, and somebody else can kind of get their feet wet doing those things before you get into the state tournament environment.
yeah, absolutely. So it'll be a lot of fun. We'll see kind of what happens there with them. Like you said, if they do get that university game, it's another tough one. And
Yep.
they have some new pieces that are trying to move around, some kids in different spots. So we'll see exactly what happens there with them and going forward. And they also have some pretty key matchups with Summers County and James Monroe down the stretch. And James Monroe is not really a team that we haven't talked about, and we won't really get to them too much today, but they've got some key matchups. They've got
Got
Summers
some
County,
players.
and
That's
yeah,
right.
they
They
got
got
some
some
good
players.
players, and they're going to be another team that I think right there with Charleston Catholic, I think is really a dark horse to win
Exactly.
the whole thing. It kind of
Yeah.
depends.
And really, they got to feel almost like they've been disrespected a little bit. I know they came up from single A, but man, those girls can play double A basketball. They can play triple A basketball. They're really good. I mean, Maggie Borowski and the Dunlaps. I mean, they got some players on that squad.
Absolutely, they do. Well, do you have any other final thoughts before we wrap this thing up? That kind of really our introduction for a lot of basketball season because when we did the last show, it was the first week of the girls' season, but outside of that, with the weather and the holidays and everything like that, we hadn't had much of a chance to kind of go over much else.
But we kind of like this time of year, because when the weather is usually cold and kind of crappy, we can get inside and watch basketball. But now it's been so cold and so crappy, we can't even get inside to watch basketball. So hopefully that kind of, gets it out of its system and we can kind of get back into rhythm. Because I really hate when the kids have to play a game or two and then sit a week, play a game. That's really just so hard, in basketball when you're trying to build your rhythm and things like that. So hopefully it gets it out of its system and we can just play some basketball for the next 6 weeks.
Absolutely, that'd be a lot of fun. Get that final race on. Hard to believe we're already into a month into this thing.
It's crazy. Yeah. Tournament will be here before we know it.
Yeah. Well, for my co-host Russ Deity, I'm the sports editor at Lootpress, Tyler Jackson. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. You've been listening to the Lootpress Sports Lowdown. We'll be back with you next week.